Welcome, everyone. It's great to see all of you here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marcel Kauston, and I'm the founder and the executive director of the Julian Jaynes Society. This is the first interview of our new interview series, which I'm very excited about. We're going to be delving into different aspects of Julian Jaynes' theory with scholars and experts from a variety of different backgrounds. Okay, so let's get started. I'm very excited to have Brian McVeigh with us today. I've known Brian for over 20 years now. To tell you a little bit about his background, Brian attended the State University of New York at Albany, where he received his bachelor's and master's degrees. He received his PhD in anthropology from Princeton University, where he was a student of Julian Jaynes, and he knew Julian Jaynes quite well. Brian is a specialist on Japanese culture, and he lived, researched, and worked in Asia for almost 17 years. He taught anthropology for many years at the University of Arizona, and more recently received a master's degree in mental health counseling, and he is currently working in that field. He has published widely on Julian Jaynes' theory. He has chapters in each of the collections that I've published, and he also has published numerous books of his own, including A Psychohistory of Metaphors, How Religion Evolved, The Other Psychology of Julian Jaynes, and the book we'll be discussing today, The Psychology of the Bible, Explaining Divine Voices and Visions. As we announced, Brian is generously giving away copies of his new book to everyone attending today's event. So if you could please reply to the email you received with your mailing address, I'll pass those on to Brian, and he'll be sending out a book for everyone. So to start with, Brian, could you maybe just summarize your new book and some of the main arguments?
Sure. So this book really is inspired by my interest on how history and psychology interact. And I think there's no better record than the Bible, because it deals with so many things that really aren't adequately explained, I think, in the literature, especially in psychology. So, yeah, of course, as you know, I take a Jaynesian perspective. I look at prophecy, the role of idolatry, the meaning of angels, Ark of the Covenant, any of the main topics or themes that people usually think of when they hear Bible, I try to address. And of course, I look at things from a Jaynesian perspective. I rely on linguistic analysis. One of the criticisms that I've heard about Jaynes is that, well, it's an interesting theory, but it's just speculation. You can't really scientifically prove or illuminate any of his claims. And I, of course, completely disagree. I think that you just have to come up with some good hypotheses. You have to use some good research tools, and you can show that either Jaynes has something to offer us or that Jaynes was wrong. And that's what I try to do in the Bible, in this book about the Bible. So I rely on some linguistic analysis, and I reinterpret certain quotations, parts of the Bible, to show how, from a Jaynesian perspective, that they make sense. And I also look at, for example, the changing definition of God. I ask the question, why has this definition of God within the Old Testament itself changed so much? So in any case, those are just some of the key aspects of the book. And I also rely on systems and communication theory to look at consciousness as really a problem of communication.
Great. And we know Jaynes talks about the Old Testament in his book, and he looked at it as a way of documenting this transition from bicamerality to consciousness. But why did you choose to do this project, and why did you want to use the Bible specifically to test Jaynes' theory?
So if the claims of Jaynes hold any weight, they should be indicated in ancient text. And I think they are, of course. But the Bible is a little bit different in a sense, because the Bible offers us a more or less continuous record from different periods. that trace out the bicameral period or close to the end of the bicameral period. Semi-bicameral period, we might say, where you have a lot of vestiges of bicamerality, the emergence of consciousness, and then what we might call full-blown consciousness. So there's really no other ancient religious text, I think, that shows the transition in such a step-by-step manner. So the Bible is I think, a very valuable piece in trying to understand James.